magazine once called James Suckling one of the world's most powerful wine critics, which is probably why the Korea Image Communication Institute invited him to participate in the 4th annual Culture Communication Forum to be held next week. He joins us in the studio ahead of the forum. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming in. So, how did you get involved with the Culture Communication Forum?
Well, I come to Korea quite often now because my fiancé is Korean.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. We're getting married in December, so we'll be back for a big wedding and party in Seoul.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'm excited, of course. And then a few friends recommended me for the program, and, I was really excited to be invited.
It's actually a culture communication forum, and one might wonder what a wine expert is doing there.
Well, in my opinion, wine is culture. Mm-hmm. When you think about wine, it's part in history, it's part in culture, in bringing people together, enhancing people's lives. I think that it really does play an important part in culture in general.
Mm-hmm. So what do you plan to talk about?
Well, I'm not really sure. I think it's really for us more to take in the delegates of the forum, to take in Korean culture, and then perhaps discuss it at the end of the forum, which I think is an interesting idea. I'm not so sure if the communication is for Korea or if it's for outside of Korea.
Okay, so you'll just have to play it by ear.
No, exactly. But I'm excited that it's a great program visiting various museums and various historical places, and I think it's going to be really, really great.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the wine market here in Korea?
Yes, I am. In fact, my fiancée is part of the wine trade, although she is based in Hong Kong, where I live part of the year, as well as in Italy. Mm-hmm. So I have friends here in the wine trade. And Korea is an emerging market, but already quite dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are starting to drink a lot more wine. Just in the last decade or so, I think.
That's right. Koreans, at the moment, it's a fairly price-conscious market, and people are drinking a lot of wines from Chile.
Mm-hmm, Yeah, that's the country where we have an FTA with, so wine prices tend to be a little, I guess, more affordable.
Yeah, that helps. And apparently there's also the same arrangement now with the U.S. and also the EC.
The EU, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What kind of wines do you think Koreans prefer?
Well, I think that Koreans, like most Asian countries, prefer red wine because I think that people realize that it's probably there's more nutrients in red wine, and I think that it perhaps goes better with Asian cuisine.
Mm-hmm. Do you think so as well?
Well, the funny thing is that I eat a lot of Korean food, obviously, because of I'm lucky enough to have an amazing fiancé who's an amazing cook as well. So in fact, this summer in Italy, I think people were always calling and wanting to come to dinner, even Italian wine producers. So I think there's proof right there that anything like kimchi pancakes or Korean barbecue or cold noodles or some of the traditional dishes go really well with all foods. And I really think that perhaps in Korea people are getting a little bit hung up or worried about what wines to serve with what food.
Yeah, pairing. Right?
Yeah, food pairing is a fun thing, but I don't think it should get in the way of just enjoying a great glass of wine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Does it really matter whether you have red wine with, fish dish or, does it have to have rules?
No, I'm really in for breaking rules.
Oh.
And I like, I'll have red wine even with sashimi. So I think a lot of it has to do with how you feel and also the temperature of wine too. For example, with red wines, if you're serving it slightly chilled, you don't want it to be too warm, then it goes fine with raw foods.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Obviously, I would say you probably would want to stay away from tannic wines. And those would be things like some of the classical Bordeaux's, wines made particularly from Cabernet. Those tend to have more tannins than wines that are made from Pinot Noir or Sangiovese.
So it's an Asian thing that we drink more red wines than white.
Well, I think in the general trend now is people drinking more red wines. I would say that America in the 80s, there was a huge white wine boom. And that was really more for people that were going out and having, wine as a cocktail. But what I love about living in Asia, I've lived here most of the time for the last 3 years, is that in Asia, it reminds me very much of being in Italy. And, the table, meals, spending time with your friends and family, it's so important here, like it is in Italy. So, wine is really important too.
Who's leading the wine world these days?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that, the wine world gets smaller all the time in the sense that you have winemakers from Italy making wine in Australia. You have Australians making wine in France, French going to California. So the world's smaller now in terms of communication. But I'm very excited right now about Australia. And what I like about Australia is there's been a movement away from making big alcoholic wines into making wines that are much more balanced with lower alcohol. Because when you think about it, some of these big wines that are heavily alcoholic, they don't really go very well with food. Also, Australia, there's a whole new generation of young winemakers who are really trying to emphasize where their wines are from. And Australia is probably one of the most ancient wine regions in terms of soils. And they have such a diversity. It's not really a wine region, it's a wine continent.
Oh, really? The whole continent?
Yeah, think about it. It's a big place to go from, let's say, Sydney all the ways to Perth. And in Perth, you have Margaret River. In Sydney, you would have Hunter Valley. I mean, that's a long flight.
It's interesting because in this one profile that I read of you, you seemed to have been against New World wines. Yeah, Australia is one of those.
Yeah, it is very New World, but they seem to be moving towards the old world in a lot of ways. And I found it was really interesting. Well, I've been going there for the last 3 years. It's very interesting because the top winemakers, you go into their houses or into their offices, and there's always hundreds of empty bottles of wines that they've tried. People passionate about wine tend to, you drink a great wine and then you want to save the bottle just to say, that was really cool. Sort of like saving books you've read. And the really great winemakers in Australia have lots of empty bottles of French wines and Italian wines. I think they take a lot of inspiration from those wines, and they're trying to emulate those wines in their own way.
So Australia is a country we should keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
What about New Zealand, the neighbor?
New Zealand, I was there in October, and there's really exciting Pinot Noirs coming from there, from places like the Otago. And that's a really interesting thing to look to. And I also like, of course, the Sauvignon Blancs and Chardonnays. But Pinot is the thing to look for.
How'd you get into wine? You were a politics and journalism major?
Yeah, that's right. I studied journalism and political science. And, my dream was it was post-Watergate in the United States, and my dream was to bring down governments like any daily journalist would do. And I ended up being a wine critic, which was sort of by chance. My father was and is still a wine collector to a lesser degree now because he's drunk a lot of his collection, which I helped him a bit with. And so we always had good wine at home, and it was part of my life. But after graduate school and working as a journalist, I went back to Los Angeles to live where I grew up. And there were no jobs on daily newspapers. So I answered an ad in the Los Angeles Times for a tiny magazine in the United States called The Wine Spectator. At the time, we had 800 readers. And by the time I left 3 years ago, we had about 300,000 subscribers and 2 million readers. So it was by chance, and it was great. It's been a wonderful life so far, because wine, like I said earlier, brings people to the table, but also people that make wine, that are involved with wine, they generally have a real passion, a real love of life. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a fun job, but at the same time, you must be very good at your job because you are ranked as one of the world's most influential and recognized wine critics.
So you're smiling. Does that mean that you think, well, this guy gets to just drink a lot of wine all the time? He must.
Don't you?
Well, it's true. I do.
Well, how do you become a good critic? That's what I want to know.
Well, a good critic, obviously, you have to drink a lot of wine, which I think, so you have the potential to be a good critic, I think, if you yourself. So you're going to have to drink more wine. But also, you have to have a good memory. That's really important because you have to remember, what you tasted, what it tasted like, the attributes of the wine. That's the most important thing. And when you're drinking wine, you need to always evaluate that. And of course, you also need a good wine glass, which I don't know if you knew, but I actually designed my own wine glass with a company called Lalique in France, which is the top crystal company in France. So that's been a great project too.
So the glass is important too.
Absolutely. You want to, if you wanted to see it, I even have it here.
Actually, Mr. Suckling brought in a case with him. I guess it has your wine glass.
Yeah, this is a case that I travel around the world. Unfortunately, radio is not the best thing to see
Right.
But,
how many wine glasses do you have in that
There's 4
case?
glasses in here. And people sometimes look at me strangely at the in the airport because
you carry around glasses. Oh.
So
you actually use those glasses to taste your wine.
So these glasses, it's sort of like a violinist. And
that's your instrument.
Yeah, and that's my instrument.
Okay, then what are some basic qualities you look for in a wine, and what kind of a system do you have in rating them?
Well, I think that what's important is drinkability. Really, it gets down to that. If we were at dinner together and we had 3 different wines, and you've probably found that, try that. You have a bunch of friends around, and it's always the glass that's empty that I think's the best wine, because it means everyone enjoyed it, they were talking about it, they were getting into it. So drinkability is really important. Also, I think that a wine has to be refreshing. That's particularly important for Korean food, I think, as well, because you have so many different flavors and constituents in food going on, whether it's salty, sweet, sour, spicy. And that's really why I think that Korean food is some of the most dynamic and fun for eating and including with wine.
What system do you use to rate your wine?
Well, I rate wines out of 100 points.
Okay.
And, of course, that's a system. I'm not sure if it was used in Korea, but in school, we use the 100-point system on exams. So an A is 90 to 100 points, a B 80 to 89 points, a C 70 to 79 points. So these points have been very popular in the world, and a very simplified system for people to understand how good a particular wine is.
I also read somewhere that you don't really think bouquet is all that important. You give more weight to taste than bouquet.
That's right. I think that a bouquet, particularly with young wines, what you're smelling in the glass, is nice, but it's much more important structurally how the wine feels in your mouth. And one thing I think is interesting is that the Asian palate really understands that probably better than, let's say, the Western palate, particularly American palate. Because I think Americans are very used to consuming sweet things, while Asians are much more into, let's say, more austere, more tannic things because of tea and all the different types of foods they eat.
What would you say to someone who's interested in wine but is overwhelmed with the number of wines available out there, totally confused as to where to start?
Yeah, I agree, and I've been talking about that a lot in the last few days in Korea, because I think that there's lots of Koreans that want to try wine, but they're intimidated by it, and because of the incredibly polite and serious culture of Korean people, they think to themselves, "Oh, I can't drink wine yet because I don't know anything about it," and that wouldn't be really the right thing to do.
Just the names of varietals are confusing, right?
So I think that people really just need to get out there and try it, and you start out with you find a wine that you may like. Maybe you like Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay or Merlot. Let's say from Chile is a good place because the wines are available here in good prices, and most of them have the name of the grape type that it was made from. So find one that you like, and then if you like Merlot, then you try more Merlots from different places, and then you find you like this winery, then try more wines from that winery. But it's all about experience, and then also backing it up with information, whether it would be from wine writers or from friends. But it's just a fun thing to get into.
The wines that you give A ratings to, are they all expensive wines?
Well, a lot of them are expensive. This is true. But I think that one of the great things about being a wine lover today are the improvements in winemaking and viticulture, meaning that there's lots of very good quality wines that I would rate 90 points or above that don't have to cost a lot of money. Wines that could be, let's say, $10 to $15 US per bottle, even perhaps in this market. I know it's difficult because the tax system is quite high on wine in Korea.
So, just influential critics don't always give the expensive wines high points.
No, we try. In fact, a lot of the time I taste wines blind, meaning that, let's say in a morning I may taste 30 or 40 wines, and those are put in paper bags, so I'm not influenced by the label.
I see.
Because I like to taste that way. Otherwise, you see an expensive wine and you're like, "Oh, that's an amazing wine," you give it a high score. Or
That's
if you see it's
fair.
inexpensive, then you may think that, "Oh, it can't be good."
Very fair. You're also a cigar aficionado. Are those two passions related or separate?
Well, I try not to smoke cigars and taste wine at the same time.
Okay, so they don't go well.
No, they don't. Wine tasting and cigar smoking are two different things. But I think that they're two hobbies or activities that people have the same sort of passion for. And cigars, probably I smoke a little bit less today than I used to. But cigars are something that, again, I enjoy having a cigar after a nice meal with friends and just talking. And what both things do is they make you spend time together and relax. And I think today, with the way we live, that's not a bad thing.
You got the best job in the world. You get to drink wine and smoke cigars every day. I wish I had your job. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Suckling, for coming in and telling us about your work and sharing your expertise with us today. I hope you enjoy the forum, and congratulations once again on that upcoming wedding.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Our guest today, James Suckling, who, according to Forbes, is one of the world's most powerful wine critics. And that's going to do it for our program on this Friday. Thanks as always for being with us. Stay tuned for K-Popular with Aswan coming up next. I'm An Jang-hyun. Have a great Friday, a great weekend as well. Meet you back here on Monday morning at 10 o'clock on the dot. Taking us out today are the Isley Brothers with Spill the Wine.